Hi everyone, welcome to Sketching on the Land with Mrs. Smith. Today we are going to be looking at zooming in on lines. My goal of these videos is to get you out and learning how to use elements of art out in nature. So our first element of art that we're focusing on is lines. So let's take a closer look. Lines are everywhere. They surround every part of our life. They are in nature, they are in our homes, they're in your classroom, they're everywhere you look right now. We just need to pay really close attention. So there are 3 types of lines up on the board. What I want you to do is pause the video and see if you can give these different types of lines a name. I'll give you a minute to pause that video. You might have come up with some different names for these. This is what my students came up with. So that top line there, some of them refer to it as a jagged line or even a lightning bolt line, which I really like. That center line, they decided was called a dashed line. And that very bottom line was a loops line or loop-de-loop line. So when you are looking at lines around, it doesn't matter what name you give them. It can be whatever name you like. And it doesn't even have to be a line like what you originally imagined in your mind. So, what types of lines can you create? What I'm going to get you to do is in your classroom, either with a poster or in your visual journal or your art journal if you have one, we're going to make a page that's dedicated just to the element of line. What I want you to do is I want you to use your pencil, and then you can use pencil, crayon, or marker on top to draw some types of lines and give them a name. Just come up with whatever you can. There are so many different types of lines. Think as creatively and out of the box as possible. So I'll get you to pause the video again here and take some time to make your own page of lines. If you're doing it as a class, make a poster of lines that you can refer to when we are doing art. Here are some examples. Now that you have made your own, here are some examples of lines that my students had created. Lines can refer to the direction. So for example, at the top here, it has perpendicular lines. So lines that are meeting at 90 degrees. We can also have diagonal lines. We can have horizontal lines, and we can also have vertical lines going up and down. So some of the lines that my students had thought up were dotted lines, zigzag, boxes here. They look like little boxes. Lightning lines, loops lines. This one they called a cloud line because it looks like the bottom of a cloud. Some of them are chain link lines. You can make lines out of shapes. A basic wave line, a spiral or swirl. There's bumped lines, diamond lines, curved lines. You can also have parallel lines that are the same distance apart. You can also have tapered lines that come together in a point. Your lines can be thick or thin. They can also be checkered. So, I said earlier, lines are everywhere. Everywhere? Even in nature? Well, let's take a closer look. Now let's take an even closer look. This is a picture of a leaf, really zoomed in here. When we are looking at this leaf, I can see all sorts of lines. Can you? Take a minute to pause this video, and if you have a smartboard, you can draw right on the screen and see if you can identify some of the lines that appear in this image of a real leaf. Use your guide that you created in your book or on that poster to help you name those lines. So, our Sketching on the Land journaling challenge number 1 is zooming in. What we are going to do is when you are out on the land, I want you to find something that interests you, something that piques your curiosity, something that surprises you, anything that you find interesting. And if you're working with a buddy, something that you both find interesting. So in your visual journal or your sketching journal, we're going to write the title Zooming In at the top. We want to make sure we put the date too. Once you get out there where you find a spot that you are really connecting with, a spot that's really making you feel like, yes, this is what I would like to focus on deeply, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a zoomed out sketch. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a simple sketch of what does this object look like as a whole. So you might have to take a few steps back so that you can see the whole object, especially if your object is large. Then what we're going to do is we are going to take our little magnifying glasses that we have, and we are going to look really, really closely at one part of that object. We have to zoom in on the tiniest little space. Using your magnifying glass, you want to examine it very, very carefully and try and identify all those little details that make your object interesting, fascinating, curious for you. So your page might look like this before you leave the school, before you get to the land, so that when you get out there, you can just get right to sketching. Here we have an example that I made showing a zoomed in picture of a leaf like we looked at earlier. You can see above I did a zoomed out sketch first, and then the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to look for the big lines that I see. So in that drawing, I am looking for those biggest, boldest lines. I am also going to be making sure that I tickle the page. That is one of my sketching rules, is that I always need to tickle the page so that if you make a mistake, it's easy to erase. If I'm pressing hard, it's going to make it very, very challenging. So I'm looking at my phone, but you're going to be looking at a magnifying glass. So with those little tiny pencil marks, those little tiny pencil strokes, I am starting to create the outline of my leaf. Notice how I'm not drawing the outside of the leaf because this is so zoomed in, I can't even see the edge of the leaf. Now that I have done the bigger lines, I need to start looking really closely at the lines that connect. There are some kind of medium-sized lines that are connecting in between. My zoomed out drawing is starting to look really different from my zoomed in drawing, and that's okay. I notice all of the lines on here are also kind of squiggly lines. There's not a lot of perfectly straight lines. And I'm also paying very close attention to what kind of looks like a bit of a checkered pattern. With my soft pencil lines, if I was using a pencil, I am connecting those big lines together. And I am paying very close attention to what I'm looking at to make sure that what I am drawing makes sense.
Does it look realistic? Is it what it actually looks like? Now I'm going in and adding those little itty bitty checkered pattern details in there. So when you're sketching, start with the big lines, the thickest lines, the most prominent lines, and then work your way into using smaller and smaller lines. I also darkened up some of those lines too, which you can try and do as well.
Here's an example of a finished one from oxbow.org that I really loved. So they did a few layers. So they had a zoom out here. They kind of did a medium zoom in here. And then they used this big zoom in here to get all those little details, paying really close attention to the bark of this tree. The other thing that I really love about this is they took notes all over this. Not only did they take their time to sketch this and look at those details, they also took lots of little notes around it to help document their thought process the entire time. So, some questions I have for you as you are out zooming in on the land. What types of lines do you see when you have zoomed in? That's what that visual journal page is for that we did earlier. We're going to look at that page, and when we zoom in on our object, when we look with our magnifying glass, I want you to really pay attention. Do I see any checkered lines in here? Do I see wavy lines? Do I see V-shaped lines? Whatever you've named. And once you've done your sketch, you can add those jot notes around if you'd like. Another question that I have for you is, what do you notice? What do you notice about what you're seeing? Just like on here, they said tiny bits of green bark, too small to look like moss, a white spider egg sac. So those are all different things that they have noticed. And also, what questions do you have about what you are seeing? What do you wonder? Maybe it's sap. I wonder how thick it is. These questions help us connect with what we are sketching and really connect with the land so that when we're out there, we're paying very close attention to what we are seeing. Oxbow.org also has this awesome ABCDEs of scientific sketching that I really liked to help you remember what we need when we are doing our scientific sketch. We are combining art and science. So when we are out there, we want our scientific sketching, our zoomed in sketch, we want it to be accurate as possible. We also want our drawings to be big. Notice how on that page earlier, the circle and the square that we drew were really big. The bigger your drawing, the more detailed it's going to be. So that takes us to C. Is it colorful, or are you labeling what colors you are seeing there? If you aren't taking pencil crayons with you, or if you're just doing pencil sketching, then your drawing might have some labels of what types of colors you saw. It is detailed. That's where those lines come into play. When we are really focused on the element of line in our drawing, we pay really close attention to not just what we think an object should look like, but what does it actually look like? I can imagine what a leaf looks like in my head, but when I'm paying really close attention and really zooming in and paying attention to those lines, I'm going to get a much more detailed sketch. And E is explained. Explain what you are seeing. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What types of lines you are using? So with that, I want to send you out into the woods. Find a spot where you can do your absolute best zooming in sketch. And when you come back, talk about what types of lines you saw. Good luck, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you next time.